My name is Ben Burgis. I am the author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left, forthcoming at the end of May from Zer0 Books. Now, if you are a regular viewer of the Zer0 Books YouTube channel, you have doubtless already heard that Jordan Peterson and Slavoj Zizek have agreed to debate next month at the University of Toronto. Now, this sounds tremendously entertaining to me. I'm weird that way. I might actually go. I've been talking to a friend from grad school who lives in upstate New York. So stay tuned on that. That might happen, but it might not. What I want to talk about today is the way that their debate is being framed. So the title of the debate is Happiness, Marxism versus Capitalism. And I have three problems with this. And I'm going to go from kind of the most dry, logic professory kind of problem to the sort of deepest and most interesting problem. My first problem is that this pairing kind of strikes me as a category mistake because capitalism is the name of an economic system. Marxists, of course, advocate the replacement of capitalism with socialism. In other words, the expropriation of the means of productions that can be democratically run by working people. That's what socialism is. But Marxism is not the name of an economic system. It's the name of a historical and economic and political theory about those systems. Marxism and capitalism are the names of different kinds of things. So framing it that way just grates a little bit, the same way it grates a little bit sometimes when reactionaries or libertarians, even corporate Democrats will make a big point of saying, I'm a capitalist, where they don't really mean they're a capitalist. They don't really mean they're an owner of the means of production. That's what capitalist means. What they really mean is that they're a bootlicking apologist for this brutal and degrading economic system. All right, that's the first issue. Second issue, I'm not crazy about the happiness part either. Saying that replacing capitalism with socialism is going to bring about happiness is a little bit overblown. I prefer Sigmund Freud's formulation. Of course, he's talking about psychotherapy, but as Corey Robin has pointed out just many times, this could just as easily apply to a left-wing political program and how we see the goals of that program. Saying Freud's turn of phrase was that the goal is to replace hysterical misery with ordinary unhappiness. And that strikes me as a lot more psychologically realistic because it's not like expropriating the means of production is going to eliminate death and disease and romantic heartbreak or friends drifting apart, gnawing sense of meaninglessness, any of these sources of unhappiness. And in fact, it might actually exacerbate some potential risks of unhappiness. And this brings me to the third and most important problem that I have with the happiness, Marxism versus capitalism framing. Happiness isn't really the sort of key value that we should be talking about here. Certainly, if you're interested in Marxism, if you're talking about you read Marx and you read Engels, and you really want to know what they get excited about, it's not happiness. It's not even equality, which is the value that a lot of people would assume that they'll be primarily motivated by. It's freedom. The one and only really explicit normative value that Marx is always talking about is freedom. And he means that in a couple of different senses. First, and most obviously, Marxists aim to free workers from domination by bosses, that under the existing system, most people have no realistic choice except for to go to work for somebody else and be under their thumb, be dominated by them for 8 out of 16 hours of the day. And of course, then you go home at night, and if you have to rent, you go home to an apartment that's ultimately governed by a landlord who's no more elected than your boss is elected. That both of them are beneficiaries of a system where some people get to live off of ownership of the means of production or of housing, and other people have to submit to those people. All right, so that's the most obvious and sort of immediate sense in which getting rid of capitalism would immediately be a massive increase in human freedom. But in terms of more long-term goals, the even deeper sense of freedom that motivates Marx and Engels is freedom from the market itself, not just freedom from bosses, but freedom from the domination of your economic life over your real life. If we have expropriated the means of production, workers are democratically running workplaces for themselves, all of the apartment complexes have been seized from all of the landlords and are being democratically run by the tenants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've eliminated a lot of unfreedom. But everything I've just said is compatible with you have everybody having to go to work for 8 hours a day, doing tasks they wouldn't have necessarily chosen for themselves. And okay, now they're self-managed, and they get to decide who exactly is going to do what and how the proceeds are going to be divided democratically. But they would, even under socialism, people would still think of the weekend and the evenings as really their time. And this brings us to the most ambitious of what Marx and Engels lay out, certainly in Critique of the Gotha Program, and also what they talk about in the Grundrisse, where Marx talks about automation. Under capitalism, if new technology reduces the amount of work that has to be done in order to create some output, then that means that a bunch of workers are out of a job, and maybe if they're very lucky, they can transition to some new job, and then the workers who stay work just as hard as they ever did. Under socialism, though, it could mean that workers just democratically vote to give themselves fewer and fewer hours as technology progresses, so they have more and more time to pursue whatever projects they want to pursue. And really what, Marx's sort of outermost dreams and Critique of the Gotha Program were a society where the cultural and technological changes from capitalism have progressed to the point where people can just pursue whatever they want to pursue. We don't really make a big distinction between work and sort of artistic projects or hobbies or whatever. There's so little socially necessary labor that still has to be done by humans. So much else has been automated that remaining existing labor just gets done through people just kind of pursuing the projects that interest them. And there's so much material abundance that people can just kind of take what they need. That's obviously several steps down the line. A couple months ago, I had a debate with a YouTuber named The Distributist. And in that debate, he was very contemptuous of really talking about anything that far down the line. But at the very least, this is the sort of regulative ideal that Marxists think that we could work towards once we get rid of capitalism. This is so workers are not just free from domination by bosses, they're free from domination by the need to hustle all the time for their daily bread. So they're free to pursue whatever projects they're interested in pursuing. Slavoj Zizek has a very funny line about this, about how an advanced communist society, we can think of in some ways, this is a very un-utopian way to think of it, as a society where everybody is free to pursue their own little stupidity. And this actually opens up some new sources of possible unhappiness. So, let's say you all, to steal an example I was using in my last video to make a slightly different point, Let's take the example of the aspiring novelist who never had enough time to write his masterpiece. Well, let's abolish capitalism, really reduce the socially necessary labor that has to be done, so get both of those kinds of freedom that Marxists are interested in, and now he has time to write that novel. In fact, he could spend all the time that he wants polishing and repolishing that prose, and maybe after a couple of years of doing that, he realizes that he has no talent whatsoever, as many aspiring novelists do at some point. Well, that can be heartbreaking. So that might make him absolutely miserable. That might tailspin him off into some existential crisis of meaning. And this is the point. Both the Freudian point about how we shouldn't think of it as, oh, now everybody's achieved happiness. We should see the goal as reducing hysterical misery to ordinary unhappiness. And also the Marxist point about the goal that motivates us all here being freedom, not happiness, which is that if everybody is free to pursue whatever projects they want to pursue, that doesn't necessarily mean those projects are going to make them happy. The pursuit of happiness is not necessarily the same thing as happiness, but it seems to me that the freedom to do what you want one wants with one's life in a meaningful sense is very much freedom that's worth fighting for. That's what I want the Canadian Kermit to fight with the Slovenian menace about, is not what kind of system is going to achieve happiness, full stop, but about whether we can and should aspire to a society where people have the time and leisure to worry about their lives being meaningless because they don't have to worry all the time about making rent.
Thanks for watching this Zer0 Books video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel and click on the notifications bell so that you'll be alerted whenever we release a new video. You should also consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to our Inside Zer0 Books podcast every week and can get access to the Zer0 Books book club and help us to continue making online content from the left.